I see. Would you like to call your presentation?
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Detective Weber to the stand. May we proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Please state your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Detective Danielle Weber.
And what are your qualifications, Detective Weber?
Well, I am an arson investigator. I went to Ohio State University, which earned me my Bachelor's of Science degree, as well as going to Penn State University, which earned me my Master's of Forensic Science degree.
And where do you work now?
I now work at the Breckenridge Police County Department.
And what does being a fire investigator entail?
Well, my job entails that I find the origin of the fire, the factors that caused it, as well as how it all started.
And do you know why you were called here today?
Yes. I was called to investigate a fire incident that occurred at Chuggy's Bar on August 1st, 2020, and the suspect being on trial today.
So what's your usual process in fire investigation?
Well, personally, I like to use the OILI method. It's a short acronym for origin of the fire, indicators, look for any accelerants, and why it happened. And I know that the word why doesn't start with the letter Y. I just thought it would be a silly joke to use.
So what time were you called to Chuggy's Bar?
I got a call at 12:36 a.m. and I arrived at the scene with my colleague, Surgeon McDonald.
And what happened upon your arrival?
When we arrived there, it was obvious that the bar was on fire, and the firefighting team was still involved in the fire suppression. After the fire slowly began to die down, the firefighting team dragged a body out of the building, and that body being Jalen Williams. After the fire was contained, I went to go inside to take some photos of the scene.
Would you recognize those photos if you saw them again?
Yes.
Your Honor, let the record show that I'm showing the opposing counsel the exhibits. Detective Weber, do you recognize exhibits 11, 12, 13, 17, and 18?
Yes, I do. These are the photos that I took of the aftermath of the fire.
Has anything about these photos been changed or altered in any way?
Of course not.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of the photos that you took on that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, we move to admit exhibits 11, 12, 13, 17, and 18 into evidence.
Counselor, I'm pretty sure these are pre-admitted into evidence. There's no need to enter them.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Stand up.
Your Honor, these are not pre-admitted. They did not add the stipulations onto, in pre-trial they did not add stipulations, so they have to be admitted in round.
11 through 28?
Yeah, they didn't add any stipulations in their pre-trial.
Okay, any objections from the defense?
No, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. And permission to publish to the jury?
Yes, permission granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind the fire. How do you usually pinpoint the origin of a fire?
Well, I usually pinpoint the origin by observing the most severe damage done, as well as examining an abundance of chemical substance.
And what was the origin in Chuggy's Bar?
In this case, it would be the fire, since that was where most of the severe burn damage was done.
And where was it?
Could you repeat the question?
Where was the origin of the fire?
Inside the kitchen.
Thank you. And how do you know that?
Well, my canine dog Bobby found multiple lighters found in the kitchen, as well as a chemical accelerant.
And how do you know that a chemical accelerant was used here?
Well, when I observed the scene, there seemed to be some irregular lines of demarcation in the area. That usually indicates the presence of the accelerant. Think of it like pouring water on a dry sidewalk. You can see the water outlines of it. It's very similar to that.
So what evidence did you collect during your investigation?
Besides some of the photos that I took, I collected debris, samples from different areas such as the kitchen, basement, stairs, as well as clothing items from Miss Sutcliffe's locker at the fire station.
So what specifically did you obtain from Dakota Sutcliffe's locker?
Well, I obtained a black hooded sweatshirt and shoes.
Would you recognize the black hooded sweatshirt if you saw it again?
Yes.
Let the record reflect that I'm showing opposing counsel the exhibit. I'm now handing you exhibit number 36. Do you recognize that?
Yes. This is the suspect's hoodie.
Has anything about it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Is this a fair and accurate example of the hoodie that you saw on that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit number 36 into evidence.
Any objections from the bench?
That's,
Please stand.
Sorry. that is exhibit 36, correct?
Yes.
And there's no objection.
Adjourn to the,
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to publish to the jury?
permission granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, can you describe the physical state of the evidence that you saw in Dakota Sutcliffe's locker?
Yes. So once I collected the clothing items from the locker on August 3rd, they reeked of a chemical substance.
Thank you. So, what did you do with all of these evidence samples?
I ran them through a GCMS test.
I'm so sorry, I'm not quite familiar with what a GCMS test is. Can you explain that for the jury?
Yes, of course. So a GCMS is short for a gas chromatographic mass spectrometry. It's a test process where we collect liquid and solid samples from the scene, and to put it simply, we run them through a computer analysis, which results in a chromatogram.
And how did you illustrate those test results?
I illustrated these test results by using a graph.
Would you recognize this graph if you saw it again?
Of course.
Let the record reflect that I'm showing opposing counsel the exhibit. Detective, do you recognize this?
Yes, these are the test results that I conducted.
Has anything about them been changed or altered in any way?
No.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the test results you had on that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit number 33 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Enter to the evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. And permission to publish to the jury?
Permission granted.
Thank you. So can you go ahead and explain these graphs for us?
Yes, so to put it simply, if you look at the paint thinner graph here and compare it to the sample from a scene, such as the kitchen area, you can see that these two accurately match up with one another. Now, if you compare the paint thinner graph to a clothing item, for example, the black hooded sweatshirt, you can see that these two accurately match up as well.
So what does that really mean in the context of this case?
It means that these samples that we collected were either sprayed or drenched in paint thinner.
Thank you. So can I ask you why you decided to use paint thinner as your control sample?
Yes. So while I was observing the kitchen area, I found an abundance of mineral turpentine, which is a common ingredient in paint thinner. Skinny's paint thinner cans were also found lying in the kitchen area.
Thank you. So did you find anything particularly interesting about any of your other evidence samples?
Yes, I did. So I found that the shoe and the black hooded sweatshirt were, how would I say, drenched in paint thinner between 6:30 p.m. on July 31st and 12:30 a.m. on August 1st.
Detective, how confident are you in your report?
I am incredibly confident in my research.
Has anyone ever tried to doubt your evidence?
Yes, that would be the defense's private analysis, Investigator Syed.
What exactly did Investigator Syed try to doubt about your investigation?
Well, first off, they tried to establish the fact that flashover fire occurred.
I'm so sorry, I'm not quite familiar. What is a flashover fire?
A flashover is where a specific area in the building heats up to a max temperature, which can result in an instant blowover.
And do you believe that flashover occurred in this instance?
In this case, it did not occur.
How do you know that?
Well, if you looked at the fact, if flashover did occur, there would be non-extensive charring patterns. However, that was not the case here. You can also look at the fact that the building was an old wooded structure and that the fire would have been complex, which in this case was not.
Thank you. Did Investigator Syed try to doubt any of your other evidence?
Yes, they claim that I did not interview any eyewitnesses.
Did you interview any eyewitnesses?
I did not.
And why is that?
Well, it's not part of my pay, and it would be irrelevant to the case considering that if there were any eyewitnesses that saw the origin of the fire being caused, then the situation would have been different.
Thank you. So what is your overall opinion on Investigator Syed's criticisms?
Well, respectfully, Investigator Syed is new to the game than I am. They also invested the case 3 months after the fire, and I stand with my initial conclusion
And what was that initial conclusion?
that this was incendiary arson.
Thank you, Detective. No further questions for this witness.
Defense, your witness. You may proceed.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, jury, all right?
You may proceed.
So you agree that the building had no windows, correct?
Correct.
Which you admit made the building harder to investigate.
I suppose, yes.
And, okay, you strongly advocate for your personal method of investigation.
I'm sorry, could you slow that question down?
You strongly advocate for your personal method of investigation,
Correct. I have a personal method I like to use.
even though it has been used for a long time and it's considered an older way of investigating.
I believe that my research and the scientific community can agree that even though it is an older method, it can accurately result in a more reliable process.
And you also went to say that the situation wasn't complex enough for any other method to be used.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question again?
You even go as far to say that the situation wasn't complex enough to use any other method.
The fire, yes.
Did you check the bathrooms and hallways for any sign of paint thinner?
I did not. That was not part of my job. I was supposed to investigate the main area which had the most severe burn damage, which in this case would be the kitchen.
Okay. Is there any chance the paint thinner could have spilled?
Could have spilled?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Question calls for speculation.
You may be heard.
Your Honor, she asked if there was any chance that the paint thinner could have spilled, but that is not, she's a fire investigator called to investigate the fire. She wasn't there when the fire started, so saying that whether or not the paint thinner spilled is not part of her investigation.
Response?
She measures for concentration, so if the paint thinner could have spilled, then the concentration could have been the same if someone had poured it.
Response from the state?
Your Honor, whether or not the paint thinner spilled doesn't change the fact that the paint thinner was there, which she already said. So whether or not the paint thinner spilled was not a part of her investigation, therefore she would not know it.
Last response before I make my decision.
It could have determined whether if the fire was made by someone specifically, or if the fire was caused by an accident.
I'm going to overrule the judge should not base an argument, but based on the fact that this is an expert and they can give their opinion whether it is a possibility the paint can be spilled or not.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You don't know how the fire started, correct?
No, I do not, because I was not there when the fire had erupted at the building.
Okay. And you compared it to the water drying on concrete, correct? So, do you agree that the paint thinner could have
Objection,
dried?
Your Honor. She asked a question and did not allow my witness to answer.
Response?
I can rephrase the question if that is
It's the
better for you.
same.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, we move to strike the question.
Stricken.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You said that you compared the paint thinner to drying water on concrete, correct?
Yes, it was an analogy that I used since it was very similar to that.
So that the paint thinner could have dried, correct?
Correct, I suppose. Yeah.
And then, moving on to evidence, we saw that you tested only what the state gave you, correct?
as well as the evidence I collected from the scene, yes.
which was only the kitchen, the stairway, and the basement, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't ask the state for any other articles of clothing or pieces of evidence, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
You didn't ask the state for any other pieces of evidence, correct?
Potentially.
The choreographic tests were conducted, and we both can agree that we saw the hoodie and everything else match, correct?
Except for the stairs.
Except for the stairs.
Correct.
And you wouldn't say you neglected certain parts of this case, correct?
Could you rephrase that question in a more specific way?
You would say that you neglected certain parts of this case, correct?
Based on the evidence that I found at the scene.
Is that a yes?
Correct.
Thank you. So the electrical box. You didn't test the electrical box for any type of paint thinner, correct?
Because it was still intact. Correct.
And we both can agree that the electrical box was consistent with the age of the building,
Correct.
which meant that the electrical box could have probably been dangerous, correct?
Correct.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
State, your witness is excused.
Yes, Your Honor, may my witness step down?
Your witness is excused.